Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hey everyone, I'm Taylor Field from Cryptid Clues, and this is the special starting episode to our Patreon series. So, if you're on our Patreon, then you're going to get this and many more episodes exclusively that we won't drop on our main feed, at least for some considerable time. But yeah, so this episode is very special because basically I've reached out to some close people in my life that have had some interesting experiences, and they've agreed to come onto the show and share their experiences and basically kind of, I don't want to say relive, but kind of go into depth about what had happened and some discussion. So it should be a good time. And to kick us off, our first person that we're joined by is Celicia. So Celicia, thank you for being here. Let's start with this encounter that you've experienced here. So if you would just start right at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. This was 2 or 3 years ago, and I want to say it was August, midsummer, anyways, pretty hot. Wanted to go for a camping trip with my daughter, and decided to hit up Monty Lake between Vernon and Kamloops. It's a beautiful area. And we just had our tent with us, so we were going to tent it for a couple nights. And we arrived at the site where we were going to do some camping. And we got all set up and everything. Yeah, after that, we went about our day. There were a few other people around us, other people camping and whatnot, but we kind of had an area to ourselves that was situated a little bit more kind of up the mountain. So nighttime came, we snuggled in. It actually got, maybe because of where we were, it actually got pretty cold at nighttime. And I would say around, it was definitely the full moon, because I remember seeing the full moon. I remember it was a super clear night, lots of stars, and maybe around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., it was like maybe, I don't know, sounds coming from the forest. It was like a mixture of like a yelp, shrieking slash groaning roar. I don't know how to really describe it, but if you can combine all of those things together, that's what I heard. And at one point I thought, well, maybe we can sleep in the car. But I thought, no, I'll just hold off, because it sounded like it was like far away. It wasn't that close to us. And then before I knew it, it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and it started to become daylight out. And that always comforts me, or comforts anyone, I guess, when you see the sun starting to come up. So that was fine. And then the next day we carried on. We went to the beach, and we had a good day. It was nice and warm. And then when that day was over, we decided to stay one more night, and back into the tent we went. And I heard the exact same thing the second night around the same time. I didn't have a clock with me or anything, but I'm assuming it was around, 2 or 3 in the morning. And this time, like, it seemed a bit closer, still in the distance, but a little bit closer. I thought to myself, is like it a bear? But I don't know. I don't recall bears sounding that way, or even like moose or elk. I don't know. And then I knew at that point, I was debating on whether I should stay a third night, but I knew at that point, I thought, oh no, I don't think I can do a third night. In the morning, I decided to investigate. There was like where we were tenting it, there was like a little trail that led up the mountain. And I threw my daughter on my back and we just walked it very slowly. It looped around. It was maybe only like a 15-20 minute walk, but I don't know what prompted me. I just thought, oh well, it's daylight and I can go investigate. But I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything. It was broad daylight. So after that I thought, all right, well, we're gonna pack up and head home. And that's pretty much it.
When you went hiking on the trail, did you at all feel any unease or anything out of the ordinary? Did it just feel like just a regular walk in the woods?
No, it was like, well, I mean, maybe the 2 nights before influenced it, but it was definitely eerie. I was walking really slow. I had her on my back and I was walking, like each step was like a couple seconds. Like it wasn't really a fast-paced, trek. It was more like slow and cautious, just really observing and taking in my surroundings. But it wasn't, I don't know. I didn't feel threatened or anything, but I don't know, perhaps the couple nights prior, I don't know, maybe it influenced me a little bit. I'm not sure, but it was I don't know, it was eerie a little bit, I guess.
When you first heard the sounds in the middle of the night, were you able to fall back asleep right away and kind of brush it off, or did you?
Hell no.
No.
No way. No, it creeped me out. I was like, what is that? And is it going to come closer to my tent? Yeah, no, I don't like anything like that. I don't know. I mean, you can differentiate between if it's like maybe like a little rodent or a bird or something, but if it's like bigger and the sound of it, especially the sounds that I heard that night, it's like, oh no, this is like coming from like a bigger animal. And even if it's a bear, I mean, you still don't want bears near your tent, but I mean, it wasn't a bear. I've never heard a bear sound like that before. So like my daughter was asleep and I just kind of lied there with my eyes wide open. Needless to say, I was a bit exhausted after the camping trip. Normally you go out there to get peace and relaxation, but I was quite tired by the end of it because I didn't really sleep both nights because I was on guard the entire time, I guess.
Did you notice at the time when you heard those sounds any other noises, any other animal kind of sounds, or was it just very quiet and just the main source of that, whatever it was making the sounds?
Yeah, no, it was quiet. There was nothing else around. Down below, I mean, I could hear kind of the highway. So, I mean, there was the occasional truck driving by, but other than that, any noises from the forest, it was just silent. And then out of the blue came these like yelping roars. I don't know. So it was a bit disconcerting. So I don't know. I was kind of on guard.
How long would you say they lasted for?
Oh gosh, maybe like I think there were like a few that happened. Like it would happen and then like 5 minutes would go by and then it would happen again and then 3 minutes would go by and it would happen again, and then so maybe it happened just like that for about an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes. Yeah.
Was it, you mentioned that there are other people staying around this campsite area. Was there anyone that you had spoken to about it the next day?
No, because everybody, they were like in trailers and stuff and they were down below. So I highly doubt they would have heard anything. Usually when you're in a trailer, you feel pretty safe. So you get a good night's sleep. But when you're tenting, you're pretty stimulated still, you're on alert because everything is kind of enhanced around you. The walls are, it's just you and a thin layer of material and the outside world of the forest. So I didn't really talk to anybody. They were They were all in their trailers down below. We were the only ones kind of up on the mountain, just like by ourselves in a tent closer to the forest.
Is it pretty far away from the highway? You mentioned that a truck every so often would drive by, so I imagine it's not super far. But if you had like the road in front of you and then just forest and mountains behind you, I imagine you're probably pretty far in from the road.
Yeah, the highway would have dipped down. You can cross the highway and that will bring you to the lake, Monty Lake. That's where people do their fishing and whatnot. So I was across from that, up higher on the mountain. So the highway was close, but not that close. I mean, I could walk there. It's within walking distance.
So in retrospect now, because I know we've had conversations and I've told you stories and different things, with what you know now, and I'm not like trying to put it out there like, oh, this is definitely what it is or this is what it is, but with the information and looking back at that scenario and being certain like, no, it wasn't a bear, do you feel like it is something that is just I guess what I'm trying to say is you think that it is something that is explainable, or do you think it's just something that is still very vague and eludes people? And I'm trying to pry at like what your take is of that whole experience, what you think was trying to yell over the horizon over there at you and your daughter.
Yeah. Everyone has different lenses that they see through. I mean, it could have been a different person up there in that camping spot and maybe they would have heard it. And who knows, maybe they could have just shrugged it off like, oh, it was just some animal. Maybe it was hurt, or I don't know. But I have different feelers and I'm always open to different possibilities. So who knows? Maybe whatever creature was out there knew that we were on that side of the mountain. Maybe they were trying. I have no idea. But I always like to keep it open that, I mean, it could have been anything. I don't know. I will go tenting and I like to go camping and whatnot. I don't like to have anything hold me back, but I still always like to stay on the cautious side. And because I don't know, I guess you just never know what's out there.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard or seen any crazy, almost like abnormal things out in the past when you've gone out camping? See anything that just seems kind of odd, out of place?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it really depends. Like, I also want to acknowledge, like, I don't want to be like too cautious and I'm like manifesting something. I'm seeing something that actually isn't, because I think a lot of people can kind of go down that path as well if they're in the forest and they're like too cautious, or they're expecting something to happen. Or if they acknowledge something, oh, this could be that, and it's like you're just blowing things out of proportion. I mean, there's odd little things here and there, but I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't really have anything to compare to, what we experienced at Monty Lake. That was probably the biggest mystery, I guess you could say. I can't really think of anything else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's perfect. I appreciate you taking the time to share that information and share your story with everyone that's listening, because I think that it's information, especially in our own backyard, that I think needs to be talked about, because it's up to interpretation. There's so many different possibilities that you can think of as to, what really is out there.
Yeah, well, there's lots out there, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, thank you very much, Celicia, for tuning in and taking the time to tell the story.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
What a crazy experience. There really is a lot of inexplainable things that are out there, and basically to lead us into our next unexplainable scenario, we have Madison. Madison, how's it going?
It's going really well. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me on your show. And yeah, my evening is going pretty good so far.
Oh, no, that's perfect. No, and thank you for agreeing to come on to the show. Now you had a experience with a friend out in Prince George, and I know you've told me this story before, and it's really a scary scenario, and I've tried to piece it together in my mind, and through recent conversation, we've kind of shed some light on more possible what ifs, but I'm very excited for you to go into depth and share your story here for everyone else to listen to. So if you can just start from the beginning of this adventure and just lead on into it.
Yeah, it's definitely a really crazy story. Um, so it was the night before Halloween, so October 30th of I want to say 2000 and probably 2013 actually. Just after I graduated. Anyways, so me and my friend Colin, we were out for just a drive. It wasn't anything romantic or anything, but anyways, we were just out for a cruise, and um, I guess because it was like a Friday or something, we were definitely out a little bit later than we usually were. And so we came to the back roads of Prince George, and we were just cruising. We had no motive of where we were going, and but I realized that we were near one of the camps that I went to with leadership the year prior. And so I kind of just out of nowhere, there was no real motive, but it was kind of, we were in that area. So I looked over and you know, asked him if he wanted to see where I'd gone to camp. And so we decided to go or just to keep on going in that direction. And we turned down the dark dirt road, and we just kept on cruising down this road to it's called Camp Elkness. Anyways, we were driving down. We were probably on this dirt road for about a half an hour or so, and so we got to the end of it, so where the camp was, and there was a big sign that said no trespassing. And so, you know, the law-abiding citizens that we were just out for a cruise, and so we just decided to turn around, and we drove back about, it wasn't very far, so about 5 minutes driving back, whatever distance that was. And there was a tree across the road, and it was a pretty big tree. And you know, that was, you know, a little strange. Anyway, so I looked at Taylor, not Taylor, at at Colin, and I told him to shine his lights onto the trunk of the tree, and there it was. It was it had fallen at the base of the tree, and there wasn't a wind or anything, but there was just this big tree across the road, and so. And I just remember him looking at me, and he goes, "Maddie, if I get out of the car, you know, will you come too?" And I'm thinking like every scary movie out there. I'm like, no, someone has to live. And so no, so we were both really scared. I remember just looking at his hands on the wheel, and his hands were white by how tight he was grasping the wheel. And so anyways, he didn't want to get out of the car. I didn't want to get out of the car. So we just kind of pedal to the metal. We drove over the first half of the tree, and we couldn't get the back tires over, so we were even more stuck than we were before. And at the time, we were just so scared. My first thoughts were like, and it just had this looming feel of something was in the trees. It was approximately, 11 or 12 at night, and we were in the middle of the bush. Like we already drove out of town at the point where we were out of town already, and then we drove farther. Then we drove down this dirt road, just so you guys can get an idea of how the likelihood of what happened is well, to say the least, pretty unlikely. But it just felt like something or someone was right there, just waiting for somebody to get out of the vehicle. And that's just kind of how I felt at the time. And anyways, back to the story. So we got the front wheels over, and we had the back tires stuck, and he just really hit that gas pedal, and finally, after a few tries, we made it over. And I I can't even tell you how fast we got out of that, and we didn't talk. There was no words said. Like, we were both just so scared. It wasn't even like a hooray moment once we made it over the log. It was just like, we made it over, and both of us were just like, Kate, like, we couldn't even comprehend what just happened, because there's just no way that tree could have just fallen out of nowhere. It wasn't that windy. But yeah, so we made it over, and we just hoofed it back to town, and no words were said until we made it to like the Tim Hortons parking lot back in Prince George.
So you mentioned that when Colin was shining the lights over the stump of the tree, or the trunk, I should say, did you manage to see the area of the tree that was broken or snapped, or where it was basically detached from its stump in the ground?
Yeah. So when I got Colin to shine the light on, it was very jagged, like yeah, like it was snapped, but it was pretty like low to the base of the tree. So that's just where it was kind of at one of the stronger, it was at like the strongest point of the tree, like the trunk of it. So it was, jagged, but at the same time, in that moment, my first thought was someone's in there with a chainsaw. Even though it wasn't really like a clean cut, that was my first thought. But yeah, it was pretty close to the base.
So the whole time that you had gone past that point to the no trespassing gate and sign, you said it was all within 5 minutes. So within that 5 minute span, this tree had been basically pushed down over, blocking the road.
Yes.
Gosh, yeah, that would be absolutely terrifying. Um, I am glad that you guys managed to get out of there. Because especially being stuck in that scenario where the first two tires are over and you're like 50% of the way there and you're trying to make it, but you can't. And as you said, you felt that there was something wrong. Someone was, or something was waiting for you to get out. And I mean, that's probably the initial plan. You would push a tree down somehow over a road, hoping someone would get out, try to tie like a strap to it or try and push the tree out of the way. Was it a tree small enough that one of you or both of you could push out of the way if need be, or would you need some like heavy duty gear or like an actual like chain to pull it out of the road?
Yeah. Definitely we would have needed some sort of gear. It was not something that, even if we tried our hardest, there was no way we could have pushed that tree off the road. It definitely was. It was a very long tree that had kind of come over too. So not only was, it was pretty thick, but I think just like the weight of trying to, the length of it would have made it really difficult. But even if it was a little shorter, it was a it was a pretty big tree.
So you say that again, you felt that someone wanted you to get out of that vehicle, and you saw this tree, and you say Colin was just white with fear in his hands. What else had came to your mind when you saw this tree blocking the road?
Just that I was really scared. The main thing that I kind of think of in that situation is just, how scared I was, how everything in that situation just felt so unpredictable, because it was so unexpected. You know, we were in the middle of the woods, uh, and just it kind of humbles you a little bit too, because you think that, as like human or something, that you're kind of invincible, especially when you're in a vehicle, because you feel like you can just drive away from anything. But in that scenario, it was it really puts you in your place fast.
You said that this happened again on the night before Halloween, and it was late at night. You mentioned around just before midnight, correct? Yeah, I find that really, really scary, really scary, terrifying. But it's interesting because you didn't think, cryptid or Bigfoot or anything like that until we started talking. And I'm not that I was like putting that into your story or trying to like change your opinion of the story. I just thought it was interesting because the significance of, oh, this tree is now blocking the road, and how relatable that is to other accounts that I've read and looked into. So again, was it that I can't speak to that. And unless you saw for sure what you had seen there, like something standing there, then I mean, it's hard to really know what did that, if it was a person out there with a chainsaw or an axe and just had one powerful swoop with his arm and he cut that tree down in one fell swoop. But I think it's interesting now because in retrospect, looking at it, would you still say that it was like human, or would you feel like there's just, I guess what I'm leading up to is, do you feel like there is just no way a human could have taken that tree down within the 5 minute period? And again, I haven't seen this tree, but from your explanation, it makes it sound as if this tree was fairly large and you would need, again, heavy duty gear to get it off the road. So it sounds like whoever took it down definitely had the right gear, which would just seem odd why a person would be out in the middle of this bush waiting to cut down this tree at around 11 o'clock at night on the day before Halloween, unless you're trying to go for the ultimate scare on a group of kids or something. But the camp's closed. I'm assuming it doesn't have a caretaker at that time of year. So in retrospect, what do you think? Do you think it was something more supernatural or cryptid, or do you stick to it being more man-caused, man-made?
Well, that's a really good question. And I just want to start with the fact that do I think that it's possible that a man could have done? Um, and the answer would be no. Even when I was trying to create in my head how this could be, um, it it my first thought was the chainsaw. But on the other note, we hadn't gone far, and even if our windows were closed, you would hear a chainsaw, and we never heard a chainsaw. I never heard a chainsaw. When I was talking to Colin about it, he'd never mentioned that it was a chainsaw, but I think both of our minds just went to the easiest route of how this tree could have fallen. Because again, I mentioned that there's no wind, and I don't think the rumble of the us driving by would power a tree to just topple over. So that's what kind of intrigued me when we were talking about cryptids and stuff is that I do believe that it's possible that it could have been some sort of cryptid creature. Again, because I never really heard a chainsaw. I wasn't listening for one, to be honest. You don't think about that when you're out there, but considering how quickly that happened, we wouldn't have been far to have that chainsaw. We would have heard it, and we never did. So it's very plausible that it was a cryptid creature.
Again, I'm not trying to make it sound like, oh, it was definitely a cryptid or anything like that. I find it very, very crazy how, again, you're out there before midnight. What kind of a person, a man, woman, child is going to be out there trying to cut a tree down within a 5 minute span to block these young kids on a road? It just seems so unusual.
And I guess another thing that was just unusual about where that tree has fallen was there's no parking lots nearby or a lake or something that people would want to just hang out and be around. There wasn't any draw to the specific part of the kind of road that it was. So that's another thing that got me is who just stands alongside a narrow dirt road waiting, like with a chainsaw. It was definitely a very wooded area, and it just seemed very kind of a bizarre placement for a person to be.
You mentioned that you spoke to Colin afterwards at some point. When this all concluded, did you discuss further with him? Did he mention anything that he might have seen that you did not notice or catch?
Yeah, so we did talk about it, and to my recollection of our conversation afterwards, he didn't really mention anything that I was unaware of. I think in that moment I was very, very, very aware of all my surroundings, um, just because there was that looming feeling of um, someone or something standing a foot away from where I was sitting. So yeah, I could touch upon that again with him, but to my knowledge, he didn't see anything that I hadn't.
Well, I think for a future episode, I'm gonna have to try and get Colin in to call in here, and I think hearing his side of the story would be very, very interesting because now the listeners have heard your side, and to have one person go through an experience like this is definitely a very interesting scenario for people to listen to. But then to have someone else that experienced that with you, where it's like that moment, like, oh, you both encounter something you can't explain, and you have to look at each other like, is that real? Did that just happen? Like you guys, when, I mean, you didn't say anything when you got over the log, but you
Hmm.
both had that realization, like, did that just happen?
Yeah, yeah, for
um,
sure.
yeah, it's incredible. So I'll definitely have to work with you on that to try to see if we can get Colin to join in and tell his side of the story. Um, have you ever had any other interesting, crazy, unexplainable encounters out there, or is this the one that basically just takes the cake?
This one definitely takes the cake for sure. Um, but out in that area, so like I mentioned earlier on in this interview, um, I'd actually been to that camp before. It was a leadership camp, and it was done in November. Um, I know, prime camp time, right? But anyways, so I'd previously been out there in November for an actual camp, and I do remember that there was uh, we had to stay indoors at one point, and kind of stay in these kind of certain areas, and it was because there was a bear in the area, um, but none of the people that I had gone to the camp with had actually seen the bear, but it was just this like looming um, bear in the area. Even though we're from Prince George, this is like a hardcore camp of northern kids. I've seen a bear in my backyard, and uh, you know, there there wasn't as much caution in the air, then yeah, if that makes sense. It was just there was a lot of caution on the fact that there was a bear in the area, but none of us had actually seen the bear, and bears weren't something that we were specifically worried about because generally um, they kind of steer clear of us.
So you mentioned that this camp opens and runs in November. Did you go and experience the bears in the area scenario after your encounter on this road the following November?
No.
This would have been November in the past,
Yeah, this was November in the past, so like the year prior.
the year prior. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And so was it just a little bit older adults as like young teenagers as counselors, or did you have actual adults on site that were saying bear in the area?
Yeah, actual adults. It was the teachers. So the leadership camp was done in my grade 12 year, and and it was also done in November because obviously that's kind of a down season for camps and such. So our school got probably a very good deal to be there that time of year. And so that's why we were there in November, is just because for that reason. And then it was the next year. So I'd actually graduated school and we were just cruising around. And then that's why in that specific time I had wanted to go visit this camp, because it had been such a while ago and I just wanted to go see it.
That's interesting because, again, talking about the bears in the area, you have usually bears, I think, as early as October start going into hibernation. So it's, again, I'm not a bear aficionado, but for bears, for the most part, to start going into hibernation and kind of recessing, kind of going away out of, the woodland realm and definitely away from people to basically begin their long nap. It's interesting if maybe it was a bear, if it was like looking for food or was just kind of pulled into the noise or what was going on. But you're right, they do tend to stay away from people for the most part, especially when there is loud noise and many voices. But yeah, one can't help but wonder what if it was really a bear. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, Madison, thank you for taking the time to share your story. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll definitely have to get you back on here if we can get Colin on the show and have him talk and just kind of hear the story from both your guys' perspectives and just see and learn more of what he basically was witnessing and what he was able to pick up in that scenario. Because it's definitely it freaks me out every time I hear it. It's a terrifying story. So again, thank you very much, Madison, and we look forward to having you back.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
All right, and that's it for this episode of Cryptid Clues. I hope all of you ladies and gents out there enjoyed this special Patreon exclusive. Be sure to check out CryptidClues.ca for more episodes and information on the show. And until next time, we'll see you in the search bar. Have a good one.